Welcome to Positive Philter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, people of the world. It's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Philter. I'm joined by a special guest. I'm joined by Dr. LaNitra Berger. Now, as you know, I have so many wonderful colleagues here at George Mason University, and I think we've known each other since I've been here at Mason, and she's done amazing work both here at George Mason but in academia at large. And so I said, I have to have you on the podcast, and she said, okay. That's usually how it works. So, Dr. Berger, please just give a brief introduction of who you are.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much, Phil, for inviting me on this podcast and for the work that you do here at George Mason University. It's been a pleasure to work with you all these years, and you've really helped so many of my students. So I came to Mason in 2010, and I came to this role as the Director of Fellowships. So I ran the Fellowships Office from 2010 to 2022. And in that role, my job was to help students apply for our nation's most prestigious national awards, like the Marshall and the Truman and the Critical Language Scholarship and the Fulbright. But I noticed that many of the students who were aware of those fellowships were typically students who had more privilege, and that underrepresented students were not really aware or apply for those awards. So my focus at Mason was really to help those types of students access those opportunities. And I'm so proud of the students I've had over the years win awards. I've had close to 60 Fulbrighters, many critical language scholars, 3 Truman scholars. And that was really exciting and fun work. But at heart, I'm an educator. And I love teaching. I love seeing students in the classroom. And I love doing research. So I had an opportunity to move back into a faculty role in 2022. And I was able to earn tenure at George Mason in art history and move into the faculty there and take on a new administrative opportunity, which was the Director of African and African American Studies. So I'm relatively new to that role, but it's a great role to have. Since I've been at Mason for so long, I really understand the people who work here and the way things work and the culture. So it gives me a great platform to be able to support students in African and African American studies.
Well, how timely is Black History Month? So I don't know. I feel like I was going to say something smart, but that is very important. You know, I've been at Mason off and on. I've been a student myself, and now I'm working here. And the African American studies has morphed quite significantly. You know, for your context, can you share from your, becoming a director and just what you came into, how has the African American Studies program shifted over time here at George Mason?
I love that question because I love talking about the history of the program here at George Mason. I stand on the shoulders of giants here, and I'm so grateful for the work that my colleagues have done to help us get to this point with the major. The program was founded in 1990 by Dr. Marilyn Mobley, and she founded the program, and it was initially a minor. And we have many of the same faculty who were here when the minor was created who are still here teaching, which tells you how committed these faculty are to supporting undergraduate students. So the program was a minor for a very long time. We've had several directors over that period who have shepherded the minor through lots of curricular changes here at George Mason, changes in the student body, and really wanted the program to grow and put us in a great position to do that in 2022. So I took over the program. First, I was associate director for about a year and a half. And then when I moved over into a faculty role, I took over the director's position. And we're fortunate that so many of our former directors are still here. So they could provide with me with the historical context of how the program has shifted and changed from an administrative perspective. And we were able to form a committee There's a lot of student interest, and I should just backtrack and say that over time, students have always advocated that the minor become a major.
The students advocated.
Students,
okay.
yes.
I love
So
it.
the student activism has been robust here at George Mason University. A lot of people don't know that. So any time that students were protesting or advocating for change at George Mason in terms of the way that black students are treated or black faculty, they have always made that one of their demands, is that the program be supported to become a major. That was very acute in 2015. It was acute and very pronounced in 2020.
What? And you can see the alignment, 2020 pandemic, things going on in the civil unrest with George Floyd and all that. So you can see these monumental things aligning with the students.
Exactly. And since I've been here for so long, I've seen the various iterations of student activism and protest, and I've seen that very consistent demand. So I knew that there was an interest and an excitement for this program to become a major. So that was the top priority for me when I came in, was to elevate this program from a minor to a major. You can't do that alone. So we had enormous faculty support. We had enormous administrative support from the dean's office. We had support from the School of Integrative Studies, which is where we're housed. And we were able to use this committee to develop a solid curriculum and put that curriculum forward. And it went through the process over the course of a year, and it was officially approved. So this was the first year that students could officially declare the major. And we have young students. We have a couple of students who have stepped forward and declared the major. So in a couple of years, we'll have our first degree recipients.
Boom, like 4 years. Now, I guess I know, but don't know. Why is that significant? Like it just could have continued to be a minor and just keep it rocking, right? We talked before offline. I got a minor in Asian studies randomly from studying abroad, and I don't think about it as much, but I think about what was aligned with that. But why getting a full degree? What elevates that? Why is that significant?
That's a great question. So yes, it could have continued to be a minor. But keep in mind that a minor is only about 5 classes. So that gives you a taste of a field and a discipline, but it doesn't really immerse you in its methods. It doesn't really give you time to deeply engage intellectually with some of the big questions in the field. And the major really signifies an administrative commitment to the discipline. And that is what we were seeking. You and I right now are sitting in the state of Virginia.
Yes.
This is the state in which the first enslaved people were arrived in the United States from Africa. Yeah. And some of the worst and most brutal elements of segregation and Jim Crowism happened here in the state of Virginia, particularly in the realm of education.
Yeah.
So we have a special obligation as a public institution to illuminate that experience and to push students to think critically about that experience. And we do that through research. We do that through study abroad. We do that through internships. We do that through deep intellectual engagement in the classroom. That is really the only way that students have a full understanding of their collective history of the country and really how to be better citizens in the world. Yeah,
I love it. And I was thinking about it. I randomly got an almanac the other day, and the most enslaved people. Everyone thinks, when they think of the South, think Mississippi, Georgia, and all that. But per population, Virginia had the most enslaved people. I didn't know that. I saw it in the almanac. And I saw a thing about how that is very important. We're in a state where, look at the flip side, like this is really important history and context to know that, right?
It's fascinating that most people aren't going to know that. Most people are going to assume, as you said, that that's something that happened in Mississippi or something that happened in Alabama. And that's why one of the core aspects of what we do in African American Studies is an initiative called Black Lives Next Door. This is a student-led research project. We received funding from our undergraduate student research office to do this project, but the project is called Black Lives Next Door, Northern Virginia in an Age of Disparity and Opportunity. And in this project, we're exploring something that we call Northern Virginia exceptionalism. And what that means is that Northern Virginia is a region in which a lot of people come from other places. And they come to Northern Virginia, they look at the map, and they think, well, it's really closer to Maryland. It's really not part of the South. It probably doesn't have the same ugly legacy of segregation as other places. It's much more enlightened, and I'm going to use that in quotation marks, air quotes. But what we found in our research is that it's really not that different from the South, from the Deep South. And what we see is that so many different ways in which segregation impacted and shaped the founding of George Mason University. Yeah. And the history is complicated. The history is dark in some ways, but it's also should be very inspiring and empowering for students to come to a university, a public university, and be able to do this kind of research where they can fully understand the history and development of their institution and know that, yes, this part of the state was just as segregated as the parts that are south of Richmond. But look at what we've been able to do in 50 years. We've been able to go from that type of environment to one in which we're a highly diverse university. We talk about our commitment to inclusion. Our graduation rates don't vary significantly between students of different races. This is extraordinary and should be celebrated, but within the context of where we've come from. So you can't really appreciate what George Mason is today without knowing how it was founded. So we have student researchers who come and they ask these questions, they go into the archives, and they do a lot of wonderful research about the local Northern Virginia community and how it shaped the founding of George Mason University.
I love that. And also, I mean, I think when we think about African American studies, I think we're thinking about a lot of history, but it is interdisciplinary, right? So what are some of the other subjects besides history that someone within African American studies would be partaking in?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I'm actually an art historian. So I am someone who's been trained in the disciplinary methods of African American studies, which, as you said, is an interdisciplinary major. But I'm an art historian. So I'm looking at the arts of the African diaspora. And I'm looking at how you can go to almost any part of the world and find some commonalities between Africa descendant people and the artistic production. So I'm an example of one branch of African American studies. We have two colleagues in our program who are literature professors. So they're really focusing in on Black poetry, Black novels. We also have a sociologist, and this is Rutledge. He's a sociologist, and his focus is on W.E.B. Du Bois, who was a Renaissance man. He was involved in all of the different fields, and Du Bois was really one of the founders of the discipline of African American studies. We have a philosopher in our midst. So we have people from all different disciplines, and we're trying to get more. We know that there are people in the sciences, people who are looking at engineering problems from an Afrocentric perspective. We have chemists. We have biologists. We have people in all different disciplines, and that's really, I think, something that's important for people to understand about African American studies is that it's highly interdisciplinary, that the Black experience touches every part of what you do. You think of somebody like George Washington Carver, for example. He was involved in so many different scientific endeavors, so many things that he discovered, invented, thought about within the sciences. That's part of African American studies, and that's what makes the field so interesting and what makes it so innovative and dynamic.
Yeah, we're even in the room right now, the Paul Robeson room. Shout out to brother Paul Robeson. Shout out, Alpha Phi. I had to throw an Alpha reference in there somewhere. But Renaissance athlete, he was an athlete. He was he was everything. He was a Renaissance man as well. And I think about the contributions I want to make to. I'm getting my PhD in communication and how somehow there's a touch point to the Black experience in that too, right? To show that it's not just history. It's moving forward. It's lateral, right? What's going on in the present. African studies is not just past, it's present and maybe the future, all wrapped up in that discipline.
Exactly. And one of our former directors, Dr. Mark Hobson, was a communications professor. Yep. So even just in the history of directors of our program, we've had people from many different disciplines who have been the director of this program. And I think that's what's really kept the momentum going and what's really kept the program very, very fresh and very relevant at all times.
Now, what has been some, this is a long journey. There's been a long journey from a minor or from the inception in 1990 to now. What has been some obstacles or some challenges along the way in this development of this program?
One thing I'll say as a piece of advice for student activists. So there's a long arc of activism. And over the years, we have really been successful with students who have advocated with the administration for this program to become a major. But in all honesty, we've struggled with enrollment at times.
That's it, okay.
So
it's like practical, and there's practical, like voicing it and then backing it up with practical things. Like, I want this, and then you don't enroll. That's not going to build your case.
Exactly. So administrators are looking at enrollment as an indication of interest. So even though we've had robust student activism, we haven't had as many students enroll in the courses as we would like. And for me, my vision is that the Introduction to African American Studies class is a common experience for all students at George Mason University. Every student needs this information and needs this kind of education. So we really want students to enroll in the classes, take our classes. And that goes across the board. So that happens at Mason, but it happens at other institutions as well. So that's why I say it's a piece of advice, because we want students to continue advocating, but part of that advocacy also means that you then have to take the courses and encourage your friends to take the courses as well.
But can I, I'm putting on my career counselor hat, and one of the things I'm thinking of that would be a barrier is that they think that is not as employable, right? Like they think, okay, if an employer sees I got this tech and engineering degree and I got this, I'm a history major, so I'll shout out to the liberal arts and all that. So I'm playing devil's advocate, but I'll shout out to, other majors. But I could see them saying, my mom and dad, they want me to take a practical degree, and I was good with the minor. I could take classes here and there. My parents would support that. But, they want me to still get an IT degree. But how would you explain that conversation where I could see that could be a little bit of that enrollment, issue?
Yes, we've talked a lot about this within the faculty. So there's two parts to answer that question. The first is that the minor is actually a small minor, or the major is actually a small major. So it's about 30 credits. And it's designed to pair with other majors. So you can be a history major and an African American studies major.
Or IT person.
You can be an IT major and an African American studies major. It's designed to complement other programs. And our advising is designed to help you get through both of those programs and to help you succeed. So we did design the major with that concern in mind. But our major stands by itself. Yes. It is an impactful major. It is a deeply intellectual major. It will prepare you for careers after you graduate for a couple of reasons. Number one is the idea that you have to learn how to ask good questions. That is a transferable skill that anyone can use in any career. And because the way our courses are designed, we do not have a graduate program. We are only an undergraduate program for the moment. And our faculty are committed to undergraduate teaching. So they push the students. They push them to think analytically. They push them to write constantly. They push them to ask questions and go beyond the surface. which is a lot of what we see out there beyond, in popular culture, that people are not really asking deep questions. We are teaching students to be intellectually curious. These are skills that you need regardless of what career you are going to pursue. The other thing that we do is we are committed to student advising. And as you know, it doesn't matter what major you're in.
Yes.
If you don't have a high GPA and if there's no cohesion to what you've studied, it's going to be hard to articulate that to an employer.
Yeah.
And I'm a trained advisor. I was an advisor for 12 years. So I'm a professional advisor who's also an academic. And because I have those two skill sets, I know what it takes for students to be successful in careers. My students are all in Ivy League schools. They're in Big Ten schools for graduate school. My students are attorneys. My students are academics. My students have gone on to many different types of careers. And that's because I have been able to both wear a faculty hat and an advisor hat and really shepherd them through the process of making sense of what they've studied here at Mason, and to be able to look backward and say, this is the career trajectory that I have because this is the intellectual path that I followed. And we really want our students to move into the driver's seat. So in African and African American studies, our students are not passive learners. They take control of their learning. And we support them as they guide themselves through this process. So that in itself puts students in a more proactive stance in terms of their careers and really helps them to be able to take jobs and go to graduate school and be ready for the higher expectations and maturity that is expected at the next level. So our program is so unique nationally for those reasons, because we're really focused on careers. We want to be able to say that our students have taken this knowledge and spread out across the world and taken these ideas and really used them in many different contexts.
I love it. Shout out to that, too. And I think one of the things, even our own executive director of career services has a degree in African studies or African American studies from William & Mary. So there you go. That's a concrete example that you can go do anything, even work in higher ed. Shout out to you, Saskia.
Yes, shout out to Saskia, because she is just a strong partner with our program.
You knew that, right? She had a degree in that
undergrad? Yes. So she comes to visit our class. So not only do we emphasize this throughout the curriculum, but in our intro class, we work closely with career services. So we're bringing people who are graduates in African American studies into our classroom,
showing what they can do,
to talk about how this major and minor has shaped their careers. So our intro class is about exposing people to the intellectual questions, but it's also a practical class to help them understand what they can do. And Saskia has really been helpful with that.
Yeah, I was thinking about the people I knew, and I was like, man, we already had this discussion. I was like, if I could go back in a time machine, I was a history major, I would have added that to my belt. But the key word is there too, advising. I don't think I'd be transparent. I transferred to JMU, and I think I met my advisor like twice. I didn't have relationships. I didn't. It was like, with this is what I wrote up my own plan. Is this good? And he signed it, and that was it, right? So I think that conversation, really having that relationship with an advisor, would have changed my trajectory. Well, I know you're very busy because you got things to do. So we're going to go right into my next segment. It's called Shot for Shot. This is an opportunity for you to ask me any question or ask you any question related to this or not. You want to go first? I go first.
I want to go first.
Okay, you go first.
I want to know more about your study abroad in China and how it shaped who you are today.
Oh, I love it. And I knew you was going to go there. So I studied abroad in China in summer 2006. And I will say it was one of the most impactful trips of my life due to the fact that it was completely random and the Eastern culture, the Eastern world was very different from mine. I'm a military brat, so I have traveled extensively and seen different parts of the world, but definitely China was way different than any place I saw. So while I was at JMU, I was just going to lunch one day, and I happened to step upon the study abroad fair. And walking around to the tables, the places I wanted to go were already booked. Salamanca, Spain was gone, already signed up. Ghana, that's the number one I wanted to go to was Ghana. It was already signed up. So I just randomly went to the China table, and they said, would you like to go? So I put my name on the email list, and then I went to their open house. And fortunately for me, I sat next to a really cool guy named Wayne, too. And he's like, you're going? I said, I'm going. And I just went, and it was 12 weeks. We stayed in Chengdu, Weihai, and Beijing. I think 12, so 12, 4, and 4. 4 weeks at each place. And it was just amazing. It was totally different. The trip was broken down by 12 white kids, 12 Asian Americans of different countries and nationalities, and then me. I was the only black person. And it was just interesting, getting stared at everywhere, standing out, learning a little bit of very basic Chinese to get around, ni hao, wo jiao, Philip Wilkerson, and all that. But I definitely have always encouraged, even when I meet students now, I always encourage them to really add a study abroad trip if you can afford it. I took out a little bit of extra financial aid. I was able to make it work. And I said, if you can do it, you get, you get credits for it. I got credits for it. But also it just exposes you to a world outside of your bubble. So I still have memories. I still talk about that trip every day. I stayed in touch with a lot of the kids in that group. We stayed in touch as friends. I thought about this weekend reaching out to Professor Ping Wong, see where he's at. He was at JMU, but see where he's at and say thank you. I thought about him this weekend randomly, but it was a life-changing trip. So thank you for asking about that.
I love that you described your trip that way because, as you know, I have another hat, which is president and board chair of NAFSA, the Association of International Educators. And in that role, I lead a membership association of almost 10,000 international educators who are working in education abroad. They're working to support international students. They're working to internationalize the curriculum. And there are so few students of color still who have this experience. And just hearing you talk about how transformative it was and still is for you is exactly why we need more students to have that opportunity. So I feel the same. I studied abroad in Paris, and then I was an exchange student in Germany as a grad student, and then my last study abroad experience was as a researcher in South Africa. And I still, every day, there's part of my study abroad that I use in my work. It's life-changing. Yeah. And we're working as international educators to be able to make sure that every student has access to that kind of transformative opportunity.
I think one of the coolest things too was this outside yourself perspective of seeing America from the outside, how they portray us in the news and what they think we're the Wild Wild West with guns and stuff. It was just crazy how they ask us questions like, is that true that they do this in America? And not, it's very interesting to see the world from the outside. And I think every person, black, white, and other, that's an American, needs to go to another country and see America from the outside. That's probably one of the most universal, life-changing aspects of studying abroad. Because you see how they, BBC News or whatever the news station, how they portray us. It's crazy because you don't see how you're portrayed when you're in this bubble, but when you're on the outside looking in, it's very interesting. So that was one of my big takeaways for study abroad. So shout out to study abroad and the work you're doing.
Thank you.
All right, my question. If we got the Paul Robeson room. Let's say you get a whole building. What name would you name that building? So we got the Paul Robeson room. So that's taken. Who would be a person you want to elevate, in permanent fixture on a building?
Ooh. I hope we're in that position at some point because
maybe we're speaking into existence. Maybe this is
going to happen. This is going to happen. So we've talked about this amongst our faculty from time to time. And I'll say that I don't have a specific answer for you right now because there's a couple of ways we could go with this. We could choose to name something after one of our first black graduates of George Mason University. We could choose a national or international figure instead, like former President Barack Obama. We could choose Audre Lorde, Bell Hooks. There are so many people that we could think about who have a national profile. Frederick Douglass, but at heart we're a local university, and there are lots of local people in Virginia, local African American people who have really shaped this region and haven't gotten credit. So there's, to me, some value in that, in really honoring the place where we are and honoring the Black experience that has been ignored for so long. Yep. So I think it's hard for me to pick one name. Yeah, and naming buildings...
I'm not going to trick you. Yeah, that's a good one. I like that answer. Look, we got Wilkins Plaza. You know what I'm saying?
We got Wilkins Plaza.
And JMU did a lot of new naming things, and people were naming it after, like, the first director of CMIST or multicultural office. So it's very interesting. I like your answer. Like,
Thank you.
It's probably going to be like a lot of discussion.
It's hard, and I want to say to your listeners, I hope that you all come to visit George Mason University, because we recently opened up a monument to the enslaved people of George Mason. And in that monument, we list the names of those individuals. And I believe that those individuals shaped George Mason, the man, and contributed to why he was such a pivotal figure in U.S. history. So I think that those individuals who have gone unnamed for so long deserve even more prominence on our campus. So there's a lot that we're thinking about, because naming is such an important topic right now, but has a lot of third rails, if you will.
I love it. Well, it's been great, great podcast. I feel very empowered. I like to write so I can have my questions be organized, but I was actually very sad I missed the reception, but I just love that there is an actual program like this at George Mason, and I've told you some way I'm going to get involved. I'm going to jump in there somehow. I don't know how it is. I'll pop up out of nowhere, but I definitely want to support this program and support this because, for me, the African and, the Black experience is very on Blacks is really important to me, but also supporting that. What I love that you just said is supporting the students. They're going to come up through this. You never know where they're going to go. So I definitely appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate this program existing here at George Mason. So this is the part of the show called Shout Outs and Plugs. Shout out means you get to show love to anyone you want to show love to. And then plugs, these are things I'll take in a note, make sure I put in the show notes that you want the listeners to follow up on or read about or anything like that. So stage is set for shout outs and plugs.
Ooh, shout outs. So first thing I want to do is shout out to my African American Studies and Center for Mason Legacy Studies colleagues, Dr. Ben Carton, Dr. George Oberly, and Dr. Wendy Manuel Scott. They're the faculty who are in the trenches working with students on Black Lives Next Door, which is just an amazing and transformative project. So I want to give a shout out to them. I want to give a shout out to my program coordinator, Jaton Myers, who makes everything happen here in the Paul Robeson Room. The reason why it's so vibrant and so full of energy right now is because she's here working with the students to make sure that they have everything they need. And I just love her, and I love working with her.
And then the plugs, what are some things you want the listeners to be aware of? Things that this program's working on, things you said about the international educators, anything. Make sure I put it in the show notes.
Yes. So first plug is for the Black Lives Next Door project. Mm-hmm. If you Google Black Lives Next Door, it should come up in a Google search because the web address is a little long and complicated. But we're taking this national. We're asking other universities to do the same kind of work, to ask the questions about who are the Black lives next door to your university campus and what has been illuminated or suppressed about those histories. So we want people to really understand what we're doing with this project and think about how they can do that on their campus. Next, I'd love to just plug NAFSA, the Association of International Educators. Okay. And that website is just NAFSA, NAFSA.org. Gotcha. The work that we're doing across the field of international education, I love that it intersects with what I do in African American Studies. and the global movement for area studies. So I just want people to know the good work that's going on at NAFSA. And then finally, just spend some time at George Mason University. Look at our website. Come to campus. Come to the Career Center. Come to the Robeson Room. Come to the campus in person and see what it's doing and how innovative it really is. This is a place where you want to be right now. If you really want to be able to do everything that your heart ever told you you could do in education, you can do it here at George Mason. So come to campus and visit us, and you'll really get to see it all in person.
Excellent. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Berger. It has been a great opportunity to have you on the show. Positive Philter listeners, as you know, every episode is dedicated to the memory of my late father-in-law, Jeff Kirsch. So please consider supporting the Jeff Kirsch Anti-Hunger Fund in his honor. Also, please share this episode with a family member and friend. This is how I elevate the podcast, learn new things. So please continue to support this podcast. This has been another wonderful episode, and we're out. Thank you for listening to Positive Philter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity Movement. Thanks for listening.